I hope everyone's having a good Tuesday.
Is that all it is?
That's, a good Tuesday. I suppose it could be a great Tuesday. Tuesday is a weird day in the week. Monday has all of its, shortcomings. Wednesday is hump day. Tuesday just doesn't have much going on for it. It's just kind of a work day, right?
Yeah, well, I like them all. Let's get started here. How's that? Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to this webinar, another iMission webinar on helping nonprofits find the right solutions in this crazy digital world, this rapidly changing digital world that we live in. iMission was founded 10 years ago at this point. We're coming up on our first decade with the singular goal of helping nonprofit organizations use digital solutions better and better and better and better. Obviously, lots changed in 10 years. For us, not only do we work on the front end in terms of websites, we work on the back end. We are a Salesforce partner, Every Action partner, and a Salsa partner. That's particularly important for advocacy organizations, but we do a lot around program workflows, as well as fundraising and marketing workflows. And then what connects the front and the back are those campaigns that engage your stakeholders, whether they're donors, whether they're clients, or volunteers, or activists, or advocates. We're looking for ways to connect with them and provide and both connect and build meaningful relations with each of our stakeholder audiences. Today, we're focused on the front end, most importantly on the website. And I'm going to quickly move this over to Brian because it's a very full, rich presentation he has for us. So just quickly, my name's Rob. I'm Executive Director of iMission, and I'm turning this right over to Brian, who is our Director of Web Strategy. Brian, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Like Rob said, we've been doing this for a while. A lot has changed, and what we're going to talk about today is kind of the reasons why you need a website that works well for you. If you've seen any of our ads about this, you might have seen some funny ones of little robots with 404 pages and old time computers with big reels of tape. We have certainly come a long way from that. However, I think the one that we can all resonate the most with is sitting in front of our computers with our hands in our heads in our hands, being really frustrated and not knowing how and why our website isn't working for us. As a nonprofit, your website is key to your success. It is not only, like Rob said, the kind of brochure that people land on and learn about who you are, but can really be a driver for the tools that you use, can really do a lot for you in terms of donors and acquisition of new fundraisers and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The idea of this presentation is really about giving you insight into not only what makes a good website for a nonprofit, but some of the key elements to what goes into that process for either thinking about a redesign and how to utilize it to drive new outcomes for your mission of your nonprofit. So we'll go ahead and get started. So right off the bat, my computer's not working, and there we go. All right, so really what we want to talk about are the three goals for a website design/redesign. Really, your site is all about who you are and what you do, like I said, and some of the things that you might be looking at as to what drives that is your site you feel like your site doesn't look good, it's not easy to manage. Or the site itself just needs to be updated so it's more responsive for the mobile world that we are very much so aware of and spend a lot of our time on. And so what that means is you really want to think about how those different components of the site are going to kind of become moving parts for your site over time. So what we are looking at here is the big idea around the process. What is it that is driving that reason for the redesign? And how you might go about that. Obviously, what you're going to be looking at are, solving issues and looking at why those issues are coming up and the different users that might be utilizing your site and how those issues drive the behaviors of those users. Really, the goal here is usually for redesign is to improve the overall performance of the site, whether that be the outcomes of your donor campaigns or the actual usage of your site and the materials that you provide on your site. If you're, obviously providing a resource library for people, it's one of the ways in which you're going to want to kind of think about how people are utilizing your site. So today we're going to be really thinking about and talking about, how to think about your site, the planning behind it, and how to manage the process to kind of get that redesign or new design done. The agenda is pretty straightforward. We have some strategic questions that we're going to go through. They're kind of broken down throughout the site or throughout the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about the process, and we're going to talk about kind of some tips and tricks and whatnot for managing the project overall, as well as like presenting the actual, the meat of the presentation, which is, what makes a good website design. So the strategic question number one, the who and the what. Really, this is all about knowing who your audience is and understanding what they are using your site for. And so, we kind of think about when in the world of nonprofits, 4 major groups. There are obviously others that you might apply to this model, but advocates, donors, community members, and clients are kind of the key components to the people who are going to be, traversing your site and using the different services that you might be offering. So when you're looking at this, what we want to do is really think about how those users are coming to your site and understanding that they're not necessarily coming to your site just from the homepage down. They might be coming into your site from different parts of the internet, whether that be from a campaign that you're running, a Facebook page that you're hosting, or if you're trying to, work with other partners in the community to build awareness around a particular issue. So why do we show this image? Well, this is a really great representation of a organization, the American Heart Association, and what they've done really well here is, really representing a campaign, and it speaks to donors and people who are going to be able to engage with this particular campaign and not overly complicate the overall ask that they're presenting to the different users of their site. You can see here on the site, they have a really simple layout. It's a really big message right in the front. It's really well branded. Obviously, it falls within their brand. And the site itself kind of drives the idea of trying to get together and unite and donate and kind of drive that overall campaign. So, when we talk about the what part of this, so we kind of talked a little bit about the who your audience is, and you're going to define who those are. And we'll go into depth a little bit more about that in a little bit. The what really gets into the components of the site. So is your site set up as yellow pages? Is it really about a resource library? Are we looking to convert people? When we talk about that, what we're talking about there is generating leads. That's a soft conversion. Scripting your clients or your members, that's helping them provide resources to their communities, or is it just about branding? Again, this here does a little bit of everything. The site really does a lot of the branding. It speaks to their community. It obviously promotes them as if it were yellow pages. And there's the hard conversion, and that's the asking people to spend dollars and time and energy to be part of your organization. So those are all ways in which your site can really engage the audience, and that's what we want to do for nonprofits, is help them understand how their website now may or may not be working for them and may or may not be speaking to a particular audience. It might be that they need to focus their efforts into driving behavior for their particular constituents. So again, we're talking about your clients. So the who is really, your clients and who they are and what they are using your site for. In this particular example, we're speaking to clients who are looking to find services. So your site as a nonprofit might be set up to drive people into a particular service set. In this case, when we designed this site, what we were looking at is helping this particular client drive these 3 major service offerings that then lead into a tree of other services that are kind of, expanding on what they are able to do for the community. So that's one really good example of how, you can take your site and speak to one particular set of audiences or one particular outcome that you're looking to do, provide your different users.
Real quick, Brian.
Go.
I mean, one of the things on that site, if we can go back there, that and particularly for nonprofits, the organization on their first on the when we first looked at it, it was a very confused website. The homepage was very confused. They had 17 or 18 programs, and they were trying to reflect them all on that homepage, and so it was difficult for somebody coming to that site that had a specific need to understand where they need to go. The purpose here is to, again, what's your big brand message? Growing up can be hard. We make it easy, right? That's the big brand message. Where do they serve? You're telling them right up top. And then really clean and clear ways, instead of those 17 or 18 programs, broad umbrellas of what those services are. Youth in crisis, right? Counseling services, family supports, so what you start thinking about, and Brian's going to get to this in a minute, is what journey are people on? They've come in with a question. We've got to answer that question in a good, clean, concise way, and we need to think about how they're going to continue that journey.
Exactly. So yeah, so your clients, that's again the who. If they are also perhaps an environmental concern, this might be something where they're looking to generate leads or education or advocacy. This can be a resource library in and of itself. It could also be that you're looking to, again, kind of give people a journey to navigate through a different set of scripted different stories that you're trying to tell in order to help them understand why your services are there for them. So that's a little bit different than the previous one where we gave them 3 options up top. This one here is really about driving people into kind of what we would be looking at as like a funnel. In this case, with Live Well, we are looking at giving them a story to follow and to relate to, then lead them into contacting to learn more and to get more information. Whereas the one on the right here is really about just having a set of resources available to your different constituents. Another option that you might be looking at is to help raise funds. In this case, you're looking for donors. We like to use the Charity Water site as an example because it's really clean and clear, and there's one very clear message, and that they're looking to help raise money in order to generate better water resources for different people. So this site, how and why we think the site works well, again, is it's very clean, it's simple. The branding of their message is really clean and simple. Just because something is clean and simple doesn't mean it's easy, but we like to use this as a way to kind of show, when you're trying to raise money, it's really about keeping it simple and straightforward and not cluttering the site with a lot of different messaging.
Hey, Brian, can you just speak to real quickly about how much time that people are going to, when they land on a site, how much time do we have to engage with them?
Absolutely. Typically, when you land on a website, you have about, at the very most, 5 to 7 seconds. Usually, that's about average, which is why you will probably see that there aren't many sites that have sliders nowadays at the top, because people aren't going to spend time at the top waiting for the slider to move. And that's not 5 to 7 seconds really isn't enough time to get a message across to people. So typically what you're going to see nowadays is sites that have one clean, clear message at the top that speaks to their brand or their mission or what they're trying to get across off the bat. And then as you scroll down the site, you will start to see other ways that people might engage, which is also why you typically see primary navigation that's really simple and clean. What you might think is that you need to communicate to all stakeholders for all purposes. We like to refer to this as the 3-ring circus. The truth is that you don't. What you need is a site that delivers specific results for the specific stakeholders. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't speak to all stakeholders and for all purposes. It just means that you're going to have different buckets that you're putting those people into and different pages and what we refer to as landing pages, and that are speaking to a specific campaign so that we can drive specific behavior to them. And so it's no longer that you have one homepage with everything on it. It's more so that you have one homepage that has the different pathways to those different services, those different campaigns or those different offerings that you're trying to engage your particular audience with.
And Brian, can you speak to the notion that you talked about different buckets or different doors, and that the notion that there's only one way into the site, and that's the front door, that's the homepage?
Yeah. We go into that a little bit further into the presentation,
Fair
but
enough.
we can certainly jump ahead a little bit. No, it's okay. What Rob is referring to there are the kind of the side doors. We like to use the metaphor of a house, and that you have different ways that you might enter a house. You don't just come through the front door. You might come through the garage. You might come through a window. You might come in through the back door. Maybe there's a side door. There's the basement. There's all these different ways into the house. And that's true for your website. You know, when people are searching online, I'm going to use Google. When people are Googling you, they're not going to land just on your homepage. They're going to land on content that is on your website. And what you want to do is provide them different ways to get to that particular content once they're on your site. So if they search for, let's say, web design, and your site comes up because you wrote an article about web design, and they hit that article, you want to make sure that once they're on that article, there are other ways for them to navigate to the other areas on your site. There might also be that you're running an ad campaign, whether it's a Google ad grant or just a regular Google ad campaign. If you're running a Google ad grant campaign that's driving people for a specific audience to a specific landing page, they're searching for specific terms that are going to put them on that particular page, and it's not going to be your homepage. It doesn't make sense to drive people to your homepage for an ad that's speaking about web design if your homepage is a little bit more complicated and it has web design and nonprofit organization stuff, or if it has Salesforce stuff. So you want to put people where they're looking, so that they're able to relate to the content once they get there. And then they have the opportunity to navigate into those other areas of your site as you move them through the different campaign.
Yeah, a quick takeaway for folks. If you haven't been in your Google Analytics, go there and you'll find a place where in Google Analytics, it will tell you where people are landing on your website, right? If you find that more than 50% of the people are landing on your homepage, you need to rethink your website.
Yep, exactly.
That's an important takeaway. Glad to discuss that, Brian or myself at any other time that you might like to.
Yeah, and it's really easy to find inside of Google Analytics as well. So it's not, Google Analytics is a very big tool, but there are some really key elements to it that can really help you make decisions. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on as well. What we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about how and why you want to create a nice, clean, clear, concise site. We're going to use this example. So on this site here, we have a couple of things that we want to talk about. We have a primary navigation, which speaks to kind of the main areas that they want to focus on, right? So the who we are, that's obviously, speaking to their abouts, who they are. The what we do, that speaks to their mission, their events. Obviously, those are really important to them if they're in the primary nav. Your primary nav is typically reserved for those things that are really speaking to your brand and what you're trying to achieve. And then what we do, obviously news and insights, that speaks to kind of their need to be in the community and their outreach as an organization. Over here, the next one that we're talking about is the secondary nav. Oops, wrong button, sorry. Your secondary nav is typically still important. However, it may not be the primary focus. And so that's why you see it over here on the right-hand side. It's in a smaller font. On a lot of our sites, what we do is we like to put that above the primary nav so that you get this kind of stacked feel. That's not necessarily the only way to do it. Obviously, they're doing it this way. And then what you see is we have a very clean, clear message with a very clean, concise call to action. Again, the whole goal here is to get people to really think about what you're doing in a very clean, clear way, and not to muddy the experience for your user. And then again, you have a set of different paths that you might be able to take, which can be reflective of the primary nav or secondary nav, or a slightly different call to action. So what we were talking about just a moment ago was the funnel and how people come to your site, and a little bit about that. What we want to do is we want you to kind of think about not just one funnel, but multiple funnels. And that's kind of, again, getting into the the mindset that your site is not a single linear thing. It is this dynamic moving element of all the different stuff that you do. And so those different funnels are the different campaigns, and you drive people through those campaigns into the different offerings that you might be looking for them to take action on. So the idea here is you want to think of your site as being more than a brochure. It certainly can be a brochure for your organization, but the world that we live in now, it's increasingly easier to make your site dynamic and interesting and engaging for your different audience. It can also do more for you. It can communicate to many different audiences or many different goals that you might have. And again, using it as a powerful tool for driving your organization's mission. What that means to us is really about helping you use your site to connect to the different tools that you might already be using, right? So if it's about lead generation, we can certainly drive leads to your site, and they can also then go through your site, enter a form, and end up in a Salesforce instance with a particular tag that helps you stay organized and not kind of trying to constantly be running reports around the different things that you're trying to do. Some key takeaways on site architecture. Again, we were just talking about this. People come through your site, not to your site. Again, that's the side doors and all the different ways they come in. The campaigns that drive people deeper into engagement. Again, the more you think about your content on your site as campaign driven, the more relative that content becomes for people and the more likely they are to engage. And most importantly, your site is not a project that is start and finish and then it's done. It's a continuous thing that you're going to want to improve over time, and that it becomes dynamic and interesting. And that helps you in a lot of different ways. It helps your site become more interesting to people. It builds relationships between your site and other sites on the web, and it drives behavior and engagement so that your content becomes more relevant to how Google might serve up your content. So the more content that is authentic to who you are and what you do, and the more that people engage with it, the more that Google's going to see that traffic, and the more that it's going to help drive your results on the other side for SEO purposes.
And by the way, if people are getting a little nervous about the idea that is continuous improvement, Brian's going to show you how that actually can become pretty easy, and that you're not pulling your hair out to figure out how to adapt and adjust your site. So sit tight, it's coming.
And so strategic question number 2, the platform question. Great segue, Rob. So, the first question is, whose code / design or process are we going to use? Are we going to customize it from the ground up? Are we going to want, a prefab foundation like a WordPress or Drupal setup? Drupal is kind of the dev world. It's definitely much more than dev world, and it's less and less used as we kind of continue into other sources of production. So where we typically live is in the WordPress world, and allowing us to utilize other themes such as Divi, which is a really great theme. It gives us a lot of tools and availability to make and develop sites that are dynamic and interesting, as well as easy to update and manage. And then you have stuff like website builders, Wix, GoDaddy, Squarespace, and whatnot. Again, WordPress, it's the leading one of, if not the leading platform. It's by far one of the highest. That has thousands and thousands of themes available, and makes it really easy for you to find something that works and then build out from there. Again, the do-it-yourself stuff, drag and drop, it's fine, but it really doesn't give you the dynamic behavior that you might need, and it's less of a it's more of a burden on you to have to figure out how to use their system than to work with something where you can hire out to one of millions of people who are providing services for a WordPress theme. And then you have obviously the custom coded site, which is that the ground up development, where you build and own the code itself, which is again, similar to the Drupal world, it's less and less the case that people are going that route, just because it becomes a much bigger process to manage that site over time, and costs a lot more to develop in the long term. So again, this is, what makes sense for your organization. You might need something custom coded if you're looking to do something that's really customized and it's completely outside of the world of what can be done within the open source world of WordPress. You might want to go with the drag and drop setup, but again, that's really for small kind of one-off things. If you're looking at your nonprofit and you're trying to develop something that's going to be meaningful and impactful, we definitely would much more. We typically recommend going with the WordPress, and there's a lot of reasons for that, both from structuring the site and having the ability and flexibility to build it out over time, as well as SEO and being able to actually develop strong, powerful SEO tools that will help, again, drive traffic to your site, as well as linking to other tools such as Salesforce or Salsa. Those are a little bit more difficult to do with those drag and drop services. So that's kind of where we're at with WordPress. That being said, Divi is a fantastic theme that we use, and they are kind of the middle road between the drag and drop experience and the custom coded experience, and that they provide the ability to do a lot of really custom stuff, while also allowing you the ability to customize and manage that stuff on your site with a drag and drop builder.
Also known as low code, no code, right?
Yeah, low code, no code. Yep, exactly. And that's our sweet spot. That's where we like to be. Mainly, it's not that we can't do custom code stuff or that we don't have the ability to do it. It's that it's really, it's much more cost prohibitive, typically like 5 to 10 times more cost prohibitive, if not more, depending on what you're trying to do. And I'm a firm believer that if the wheel has been created, there is no reason for me to have to redesign the wheel unless what you're looking for is a wheel that can drive on the moon. So with that, we'll jump into strategic question number 3, the who and how. So the first thing that you need to do is your homework. And what we mean by that is figure out who's coming to your site, through what channel, and why. The tool that we use for that is Google Analytics. There are some others out there, but Google Analytics is by far the kind of industry standard, and it provides an in-depth analysis of pretty much every possible thing that you could possibly want to know about your website, whether it be the amount of time people spend on the site, the bounce rate, which is when they come to your site and then just bounce off and not do anything, the particular pages that they're landing on, the particular pages that they're exiting from, the different places that they're coming in from. And what we mean by that is there's a source medium that we're able to see, who they are, where they're coming from, whether it be social or Facebook, or social or some other referral site like a partner that you're working with and whatnot. And again, this is all over time. So you're able to see what those results are, from month to month or year to year. And if you're on there for an extended period of time, decade over decade, and really see that the change in the traffic of your site and what people are doing on the site and what they might be using it for. So again, the first step, do your homework. Once you've done your homework, then you're really looking at how you can apply that data. And again, we talked about funnels earlier. Those funnels really are about evaluating, or are really about helping you take that data that you've evaluated and say, oh, well, look at this. We have these people who are interested in this particular topic. Let's do a campaign around that topic, and let's drive people to increase that behavior, and try to generate some kind of outcome, so that kind of understanding of who your audience is and what outcome you want them to take. And that's kind of the whole goal of the funnel, is you take them through that process of, creating an action point. Now, again, there's really no limit to that. It's really about, what are your resources and what are your goals, and how do you want to take the different type of audiences that you're targeting and drive them into those different funnels. Do you want to talk about this at all, Rob?
Yeah, you covered that really nicely. Rock and roll.
Cool. Again, knowing the who and the how. So basically what we're talking about here is, once you know who your people are and how they're using your site, you can do a better job of understanding what to provide to your users. Whether that is that you are seeing that they're using content that you're building for them and that there's a lot of use there, or maybe they're not using that content. You might be spending resources on producing content that they're not going to use, and you might need to evaluate how you would like to change that behavior. Either A, increasing resources to drive more likely leads to that type of content, or B, reassessing that content and producing new content that is more relative to what people are looking for out of your site. It also allows you, knowing the who and the how, really allows you to put together a better RFP. So when you're putting together the RFP for a site redesign, it's really important to know what you're currently doing with your site and how it's currently working. And it helps you present that data to the particular people who might be wanting to respond to your RFP. Again, communicating services as a provider or establishing baseline measurements to measure against. So knowing the who and the how really helps you set up what you want to measure against later on. So you can say, hey, we changed this, and this is the new outcome that we have. And we can say that this is either a positive outcome or a negative outcome based on what our previous baseline was. Ultimately, knowledge is power. That's true across pretty much everything in the world. The more you know, the more you can affect change and make a better outcome for the people that you're trying to generate this content for. So all of that to be said, what we're going to talk about now is the stuff that makes a good design. There's a lot that can go into that. Design is not just a matter of making something look pretty. It's really thinking about the use of a particular site, really thinking about what the goals of a particular site are, and again, how that audience is going to engage with that particular site. So what we're showing here are 3 different examples of sites that we've developed for some different clients. You can see there's some similarities between them, but they're also very different. There's also some very different goals behind them, right? So we talked about Live Well earlier. Their goal was really about developing a narrative and creating a story and having that drive people into the behavior of contacting them. The folks at Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Hartford, they have a little bit more of a complicated system. They wanted to, give people both a narrative as well as drive some really key services that they're offering. So what you see here is kind of the idea that you can kind of take some actions quickly at the top, or you can kind of start to go through this narrative as you scroll through their site. All of these sites that we've developed are both web or desktop as well as mobile friendly. And the goal was, again, giving them that ability to scroll easily, but also be able to, communicate the key components of their materials that they're trying to provide. The folks over at Literacy How, their goals were really, again, a little bit more complicated than the Live Wells. They had 3 major audiences that they were focusing on. And so you'll see on that site, it's basically broken down by those different audiences. And then within every one of those audiences are a set of services that you can kind of drive into, as well as some, lack for a better term, some really wonky information about, reading and learning and how reading can be, one of the key components to your child's success in life.
And by the way,
So
Brian, I looked at the numbers earlier this week on Literacy How. So kudos to you. That site in the last year has tripled tripled the amount of visitors to the site, and the level of engagement, time on site has been quite a bit higher. So
yeah,
launched last year, major differences within a year. So good work.
Thanks. And some stuff to keep in mind. So that's a really great example of, again, we had some baselines to measure against. We're able to see that increase. But what's really important there is when you redesign your site, it's going to take time for that to kick into gear. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be like, hey, we completely redesigned our site and now everything's good. You have to think about what the campaigns are that you're going to drive into the new redesign. And so I think, Rob, remind me of the number, but I believe it's take whatever you're spending on the redesign of your site and add a multiplier of 3 on the resources that you need to allocate in order to drive new traffic into the different campaigns. Is that correct? And then what we mean by that is just,
that's a good number.
Yeah. And so it's just what we mean by that is just whether it's a Google Ads grant that you're utilizing to drive traffic to your site, like Literacy How or LiveWell are both running Google Ad Grants. What you want to do is you want to try to take the resources that you have at your disposal and drive behavior to your site. Just changing your website isn't going to change your ranking in Google. It's not going to change how people search your site. You have to help people get there to effectively make that change. One of the key components that you'll see within each of our sites that we're showing today, these are all very clean, simple, easy to read, easy to navigate, mobile friendly, and really about creating an experience for people to match up to the brand experience that they want as an organization, or B, drive the behavior that they were trying to achieve, whether it be, to get an increase in traffic or time on site, or again, to take a particular action. The moving parts. So again, design is not about just making something pretty. There's a lot that goes into the process. There's everything from thinking about the marketing side of it to the design, the UI, UX design, and that's all about like the layout and how it interacts with the user and how it changes based on sizing and of the browser or the device that you're on. Content.
Real quickly, Brian, UI, UX means what?
User interface and user experience.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have said that. And again, those are just some of the components of what goes into it. A lot of the time, what people don't realize is the content is the biggest component of the site. One of the biggest things that we take into account when doing a redesign is going through the process of looking at all of your content and what it's currently doing and saying, and how it's being how it's presented on your current site, and what you want to change about that. That part of the process can be some of the most arduous, but it's the most important because that's what people are seeing and reading, and it's what drives the layout itself, right? So, for instance, again, I'm going to use these as examples. All three of these sites have a ton of content on them, and you can see it's broken up differently. And the people that we worked with for Literacy How, they did a really great job of writing all their own content and really thinking about it really thoroughly and laying it out in such a way that allowed us to help better represent that content. Knowing what the content is helps us better figure out what kind of layout to use for that particular piece of content and how it needs to change based on the device. Same thing for JCF, the Jewish Community Foundation. They have a ton of content, but you can see we really pared that down to some really clean messaging to help drive particular behaviors and service offerings. So as you go deeper into that particular site, you'll see there's actually more and more content as you go deeper. Whereas Literacy How, there's kind of a lot all up front, but there's just because it's so dense in its importance and how it relates to learning as for young folk. And again, that site's really geared towards teachers, administrators, and parents. So there's like the idea of it being wonky is fine because people are looking for the depth of information. The folks at Literacy over at JCF, that was really about giving clean, clear, concise messaging that helped people take a particular action. And again, over at LiveWell, it's kind of a mix of the two. We wanted a little bit of a narrative, which means that there's a little bit more content, but we still wanted to kind of give that kind of clean, clear, concise messaging that helped drive a particular behavior. So again, these are just some of the things that you want to think about. Typically what you're going to see, and the reason why they're different sizes is there's some different importance there, right? So like copywriting is very important. Like it's perhaps one of the most important things on your site. If you have bad copywriting for your site, it's just people are gonna walk away. The web design, again, is very important. UX design, very important. Programming, I mean, that's becoming a little bit less important because again, the programming is the code behind it. And again, the low code, no code kind of solutions are really where we're at in the typical space that we live in, and try to help you so that you don't have to rely on a particular program language or a particular programmer to do web updates. You yourself can do those web updates very easily. SEO, again, is hugely important. So again, layout. The key here in the process, this is all about learning and discovering and figuring stuff out. You want to iterate as much as you can before committing to a particular layout or design. That being said, it's really easy with the systems that we use nowadays to make edits and changes. But what's difficult is changing the content on those particular layouts. So we can put up wireframes, which is what these are called. I'm sure you've seen these all over the place. A wireframe is basically like, hey, we're thinking about these things in these places, kind of like this. And that just helps the designer, prepare and set up a site in such a way that can kind of give you a look and feel and flow of content. And so it's the process is a little bit of a give and take. You kind of talk about and think about your content as a whole, and then you think about how that content can start to fall into these different types of layouts. So again, the key there is iterate, 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 and come up with as many ideas as you can so that later on you have all the pieces that you need to put together in a very clean, concise layout.
Yeah, what's your view of perfect is the enemy of good?
Absolutely. So typically what we try to do is we try to launch a site somewhere around 95 to 98% there. And what we mean by that is your content is 100% clean. It's proofread. It's got all of the spelling checked and everything. It's the content that you want. And the layouts are pretty much what you want them to be. Adjustments like this word instead of that word, that can happen after the fact. That's the small minutia that will literally drive you insane, and you will never get over the finish line because you're trying to figure out, do we want to use the word and versus an ampersand on every page of the website. So it's just, you want to keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and really think about how you can get over the finish line, knowing that it's really easy to make updates later. We no longer live in the world where it's going to require somebody to spend 5 hours to make one single word update on one single page. Not that that ever really should have been the case, but we've moved far beyond that. Now that being said, can we as iMission design a site faster because we know what we're doing? Absolutely. But knowing your ideas and knowing where you want to go and knowing what you as the client want to do helps any designer, us included, basically providing solutions for you. The worst thing you could do to a designer is say, hey, here's a blank canvas. Go forth and do whatever you think is best, because inevitably we know as designers that we'll come back to you and it'll be a much longer process to get to where you want to get to. So doing a little bit of that homework upfront, thinking about your content and the flow of your content helps any designer or any service provider kind of provide solutions for you that are going to better fit what your needs are.
Yeah, one of the things you do, Brian, is just say, go out and find 3 to 5 websites that you really like and tell us why.
Exactly. And tell us why you don't like other websites, because knowing what you like and what you don't like helps me not present things that are going to turn you off. I don't want to send you some ideas that you're like, yeah, I don't like the color blue. Or I really don't like the way that flows. So knowing what you like and don't like helps us really develop better sites and better solutions. Again, a blank canvas is a lot harder to work from. So features and plugins. Again, features and plugins are all the rage. There's thousands and thousands of them for the WordPress solutions, and even some of the plug-and go ones. Custom coded solutions, again, you're running into high cost and high long-term cost and update components for that. Basically, the way we think about this is, there's probably something that fits just about anything that you're looking for. The goal of any plugin or add-on should be it's adding a component to your site that's missing that we can't necessarily build within the given theme that we have. But we don't want to load your site up with hundreds of plugins. Really, what we want to do is find the plugins that help you do what you want to do, and find solutions within the kind of the building of the theme and the layout of the content that provide the outcome that you want to provide. The more plugins that you have on a site, the more resources of the server are used. And what I mean by that is just like your computer, a server is a computer. You have an allocated amount of space on that computer and an allocated amount of RAM. And the more stuff that you have running on the server, the more RAM and other resources are being used and can slow your site down. So plugins are great. Too many plugins is bad. They are also the things that can help connect your site to the different elements of other services that you might be utilizing, like Salesforce or Salsa, and can really, again, drive really dynamic interactions between the user's experiences on your site and your back of office organization. Form, function, and mobile. So this is really all about understanding that the site that you design for your desktop is not exactly the site that you design for your phone. It sounds pretty straightforward, but people forget that when, you know, designing their site, they have to think about what that scroll experience is going to be. And so you really want, again, this is a great example of wireframing. You're wireframing for the desktop, wireframing for the mobile, thinking about the flow of the content, the flow of the experience, and how people move from one component to another. And again, how that content shifts and moves. So again, what we're talking about here is really thinking about, you know, this site on the left-hand side, this wireframe is a really great wireframe, but, you know, what that experience is going to be like on mobile is actually probably not that great. And I say that because there's a lot of moving parts within that wireframe. And basically the best way to think about this is every single horizontal, every time you have a column within a row, that then becomes, you know, stacked as you go to mobile. So basically you take that design on the left, and when you put that into mobile, it's just going to be an endless scroll from top to bottom, and it's going to be really hard for people to navigate into those other components of your site. So keeping your site simple, keeping your ideas concise and clean really helps drive better outcomes for your site and the behavior that you want people to take on it. Just a quick note about mobile apps versus a mobile responsive site design. A mobile app is essentially an actual application that is developed with particular intent and content developed for it. It's similar. I mean, this is like your Twitter, your Facebook, your any app that's on your phone. Whereas a mobile responsive site design it's a site that is designed with the intent of it converting itself when moving to a device. So you can certainly go the route of creating a mobile app for your site. It's a much more expensive process. Again, that's getting into that custom code solution that just, you know, it's going to require a lot of overhead up front, and then a lot of long-term maintenance resources that need to be available to maintain it over time. So just some quick notes about managing the project. Some things that you want to think about as, you know, managing the design. Again, you're kind of talking, we talked about this a little bit. You want to think about who is going to manage the project on your side, and then who they're going to relate to on the actual development team, who are doing the design itself. Again, what are the big milestones? You really want to map out, you know, what are the key components that you need in order for this project to kind of continue to move down the road. Typically, the way we structure this is, you know, we do some initial intake. We then go through the process of assessing, you know, your content. We then do some, you know, content management stuff and figuring out how to organize that. Then we talk about, you know, looking at some different layouts, and then we go through an iterative process on the homepage. Once we get that homepage laid out, we then start to lay out these other kind of key component pages like cornerstone pages, engagement pages, and so on. And so every milestone is like you move through that process, and that just helps the project really move down the line. And then again, the biggest thing is setting timetables and expectations of meeting those timetables so that you don't run into delays. That's not to say that you can't have delays, but you should try to factor in the fact that you might have delays around content, right? Especially if you're working with committees or boards to develop that content. Whatever you think that you need to spend for time, multiply it by 5 or 10, because it's going to take more time than you think to get more people involved and engaged in that content. But again, a key way of avoiding some of that is to just understand that on the other end of all that content development, it's really easy to change the content, and keeping that at the forefront of your mind as you're developing the content should help you eliminate some of those delays, because you can really kind of nip it in the bud to say, hey, yeah, we can certainly spend all this time arguing about what this word means, but ultimately we can change that word after the site is live.
So just
And then
real
again,
quickly, Brian. So, I mean, a kind of a solid website development timeline, 90 days, 120 days. What are you thinking?
it's depending upon the organization, but our typical site without delays is about 90 days.
Thanks.
With delays, because it's some design by committee stuff, and they're engaging with other stakeholders, you're looking at the 120 or more. And the key, your end goal should just be to get to launch and to get started, and then know that you're going to make changes. The idea that your site is launched and then done and then you never touch it again, that's old school thinking. You do not want to think like that. You really want to think about your site as this dynamic, interactive thing that helps you as an organization do good in the world, which means that you should be updating, which means that you should be engaging in new content, and that you should try to get your users to use it in new and interesting ways, and that you drive campaigns to these different messaging components that you're trying to put out into the world to have specific outcomes.
And by the way, people can get scared about the amount of content we're suggesting you can create, but it's that content can get we've walked into a lot of nonprofit organizations, and they have reams of great content that have been developed over the years.
Absolutely.
So one of the key things you want to look at is what's in your files already, because chances are, if your nonprofit's been around for a while, you've had really good, smart people who have developed great content, year-end appeals, capital campaigns, client outreach. So, take a look at what's already there, and then figure out how to repurpose content of the past and content you create in the future into social, into email, into text, into all this other ways. That consistent brand, that consistent theme, that consistent calls to action are just constantly being reinforced through all things digital.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like we were saying earlier, we definitely believe in recycling what you've done, in much the same way that we don't believe in creating the wheel because it's already been created. To Rob's point, if you have good content, or if there's old content that's from years and years ago that can be kind of rejuvenated, that is a lot easier to start from than it is to try to create something out of nothing. One thing that we like to say is, if your goal is to do a rebrand of your site, you should start with the rebrand process. Don't do a website as a rebrand process. Those are two very different things. And they're related in that, yes, when you do your rebranding, you're going to have to redo your website. But using the website as the tool for the rebranding is not a good use of resources. You should figure out your rebranding before doing your site, because that rebranding process will really help you figure out what needs to be on your site. Whereas just, otherwise it turns into a much bigger process, and again, many delays. And it's a website redesign is a website redesign. Rebranding is rebranding. Don't conflate the two. This again kind of goes through kind of the project milestones in a much more simple way than what I was explaining. All that to be said, thank you very much for your time today. We'll open it up to questions in a few minutes. We can kind of walk through a couple of examples of the tools that we use to kind of give you an idea of how the world has changed, perhaps. Then you might have remembered it last time you looked at your website and tried to make updates. We certainly work with clients who don't use the themes that we use. And those are sometimes more challenging than we like, but we are very capable of doing that. It's really a matter of understanding the tools and knowing what you can do. But I'm happy to answer questions as Peter.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came up, and this is both, so this is one about design for accessibility and disabilities, is how do you do that? And I ask it two ways. One is how to avoid getting into trouble, right? Because you can get sued, right? On the one hand, and then how do you actually do it so folks with disabilities can really find the site just more useful?
Yeah. There's a number of ways. There are tools for one. We definitely recommend a few of them that can be plugged right into your site that help convert the content of your site. to be more accessibility friendly. And then there's just some kind of baseline best practices, keeping the language simple, not overly complicated, depending on what kind of accessibility you're trying to get to within the site. And then obviously tagging and all of that stuff on the back end, alt tagging and everything is a hugely important element to creating the ability for readers and other components that are tools that accessibility partners might be using to drive the different devices to understand what's on your site. Those are kind of the major ways that you can think about it. And then the other way is really the layout of the site. Making the site clean and simple makes it a lot easier for those readers to understand what they're looking at and how they break down the different parts of your site. If you have a lot of layers to your site and there's all these different things that are moving in and out and pop-ups and flash and there's stuff that's just really making the site messy and busy, that's going to make it really hard for somebody with a disability to either look at your site and understand what's going on, or B, for their device that's there to help them look at your site and help them understand what's going on to do exactly that.
Hey, Bill or William is asking a question here, and he's asking, talk a bit about nonprofits which operate exclusively on volunteers, no paid officials. His nonprofits depends completely on volunteer webmastering, which he said has proven to be sometimes disastrous.
Yeah, I mean that's a struggle. Obviously, if you have people who are volunteers, don't necessarily have all the world and all the time in the world to dedicate to your organization, and they have a set amount of time or effort. They're also, it's hard to do a redesign on a volunteer basis, right? And so you wouldn't necessarily want to try to find, unless you have a dedicated volunteer program to doing that process of the redesign of your site.
Yeah, I think maybe two different questions. One is the redesign, which could be a pretty could be a few members of the board, right? And that certainly can work fine, and we've done that in the past, and that certainly can work fine. The question of how do you maintain a site going forward with volunteers, I think from our experience, one is the challenge of volunteers is the continuity. But if you have volunteers that deliver continuity, what the low code, no code solutions that are working with a series of templates, and in many cases don't require somebody to go to the back end of WordPress to manage it. We can actually do it from the visual page. It's a visual builder. So if you embrace today's technology, with, as Brian talked about, with themes, with plugins, no code, low code, the ability to empower volunteers to some degree is so much higher than it's ever been. That said, you do need to think about somebody who is going to support you behind the scenes, or support your volunteers, and train those volunteers, right? It's about training, and it's about recognizing that volunteers change over time, and that there's the famous challenge of, what is it? The kids game, telephone, where one person says the one thing to somebody and it comes out very different. The problem with volunteer handoffs from one volunteer to the next volunteer to the next volunteer, what we found is that they end up with really bad broken processes because they've changed. So, I mean, I think that's, you think that reflects our experience pretty well, Brian?
I do. Yeah. I mean, anytime you're going from one person to another person, unless there's some component that is creating consistency from that person to person, it's really going to be difficult to create that consistency.
Anyway, it is 3 o'clock, so mindful of people's time. I'm amazed you got through all those slides in 15 minutes. That was incredible. No. So thank you. That was a great presentation, Brian. Thank you. We will send out both the recording and the slide deck to anybody who's interested. And we, of course, if you want to have a conversation about your website, yeah, just give us a call and we'll find time just to chat. And we can talk about whether it's the right time for you and what might be the right course of action. So with that, great work, Brian. Thanks. And
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely.
I wish everybody a very happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye-bye.